Hey Broncos fans, Joe Grima, head coach of the London Broncos. In the segment of Ask Grima, I just want to thank all the people that took the time out to send in their questions. First question from the London faithful: how long do you think it is until the Broncos are made up of local players? London faithful, it's a very difficult one to answer, and I think that if you ask any club in any sport, they would say the same, in that it would be unfair and ridiculous to say that all our players are going to be local-based players, London-based players. However, what we want to ensure is that our better local-based players aren't moving on to other clubs and want to stay at our club, and that's going to be determined by what we implement over the next season or two. So that's certainly one area that we want to address. We just have to look in the Super League now and identify the players that were at London Broncos over the last 2 seasons, and it's disappointing that they're not here, but there are reasons by that. So we're doing our best to ensure that we keep our best London Broncos players here. Brad asked a question about what coaches do I look up to. There are a couple of coaches I look up to, particularly Steve Price, who I worked with over the last 2 seasons, and before that Ricky Stewart at the Cronulla Sharks, just in what he's achieved as a player and a coach. But the person who's had the most, or the coach that has the most influence on me, is Brian Smith. When I had been working under Brian for 9 years at the Parramatta Eels, he really taught me about skill-based structure, and taught me about the professionalism and the way to deal with a variety of players. So he certainly has been a huge influence in my coaching career, and I have a huge respect for Brian and his brother Tony, and they're very similar in the way that they set up their structures. Wherever they go, they've always had success. So Brian Smith would be certainly at the top of the tree. London faithful again: do you think the 19s players are prepared enough for the speed and intensity of Super League, and how can we improve their prep? I think it's quite simple, London faithful, is that they need to have an off-season. We're looking at an under-19s team which have not had an off-season, so their development, their speed, their size, their skill level aren't what it should be at the under-19s level. So for that one there is just to ensure that both the senior side, the first team, and the under-19s team have a off-season, so they can ensure that they're on par with the size and the speed of the other teams that they're playing against. Paddy Malone writes: some players now know that they will not be at the Broncos in 2015. How can you keep them motivated in 2014? Paddy, that's the million-dollar question for me, and it has been for some time. As you may be aware, Paddy, that we've got a squad of 32 players, 21 of which won't be here next year. So for me, as a coach and my coaching staff, my backroom staff, it's imperative that we make training enjoyable and exciting, and that we continue those professional standards that we have to ensure that the players remain motivated for the last 6 games. It's very hard at the moment, depending on what the situation of the player, whether they're going to be playing in other Super League clubs or whether they've been told that they're not required for next year. But it is a challenge for my staff and I, and we ensure that we're planned and focused and prepare ourselves as best we can for the game coming up for the weekend. Lucy Nicole writes: are some of the 19s who have signed, like Harvey Burnett, going to play Super League this season? I've got every intention to play any of the 19s players, and if they put their hand up and they're playing well in the academy, they're going to have an opportunity to play. We've already seen that with a number of players this year in John Wallace, Joe Keys and James Woodburn Hall, although James played a little bit of first grade last year. There's no reason why Alex Walker, Harvey Burnett, Toby Everett can't play first grade this year for the Broncos. However, it's going to depend on their attitude and their training and their how they're performing back with the 19s academy team. That drill, who's got that drill? Samuel asks: do you think the RFL plan will work in favour of us next year? Samuel, I think the RFL plan will work in favour for everyone. I think it's an exciting time for rugby league, particularly in our situation that we are going to be relegated next year, but it gives us the opportunity to bounce back within 12 months and playing for an opportunity, if all things go well, that we're playing again for contention into Super League. So the excitement for the teams in the championship is greater, and I guess everyone has to be on their game, whether it's the Super League or the Championship, because if you're not careful, you could be one of those teams that is in the relegation zone. So I think the Rugby League are on to something very, very successful here, and the catchphrase they're using is to play for every minute, and I think that's exactly what it does, that you can't rest whether you're in contention or not in contention of being promoted, because you could go the other way and get relegated. Aaron Lomax writes, do you think we can overcome an 800k difference in the salary cap to get promoted? Sounds impossible. It does sound impossible, Aaron, but if you look at the season that Lee Centurions have had, they're in a similar situation, have been fantastic in their whole program, in rivaling a lot of the Super League clubs, and over a month ago they played Leeds and were very, very good. So there's no reason why we can't. We need to ensure that we've got the right culture and the right players at our club. Other teams that have overcome this, is certainly one from this year is Castleford Tigers. They came from a similar situation, and Widnes Vikings 2 or 3 seasons ago. So there's certainly a lot to suggest that we can't bounce back, given the deficit in our salary cap next year. Mark Remond, aka Remo, sends a question. Do you feel that I have the complete support, faith and trust of the London Broncos supporters? Remo, you're a great friend of our club, and you, along with a lot of supporters, have been through the tough times, and no doubt will be there during the good times ahead. I can only go by the feedback that I get by yourself and other supporters, and that, albeit disappointing after the game, the encouragement that you guys give me in the direction that I'm taking the club just typifies that I do have the trust and support from you guys, and I thank you for that. And I'm sure that will be repaid in the future. Michael writes, will the team be able to compete with the physicality and savviness of the championship teams? Michael, I'm very confident that the players we've retained and the players we've identified to come to our club not only have the savvy nor the physicality, but the speed and the skill, not only to compete but to be a top 4 team next year. I'm very confident in our recruitment, and very confident with the culture in which we're trying to create for 2015 and beyond. Debbie Knight, what plans have you got in place to try and match the size of the opposition next year? Always an issue. It has been an issue, and part of my previous questions, Debbie, is that we haven't had an off-season this year, so we're 3 months behind everyone else before a ball's even kicked off. But as I said with Michael, I'm very confident that the players we've attracted and signed and kept at our club are not only going to be sizable, but they're going to be skillful players, and certainly have a lot of speed to match. Michael asks, why do players always say training at other Super League clubs is more intense, and why do they always appear to be bulked up when they leave us? Michael, I don't think that training is more intense. I think that other players go to other clubs and they have a different training regime. There would be different competence that other coaches would introduce or implement, which may seem that the training is intense, when in fact it's different. I'm a skills-based coach. I rely a lot on skill conditioning games. Other coaches may be more dominant defensive contact-based coaches. That's where the illusion may come that it's more intense. It's certainly different at every club. We have similar coaching philosophies, but the structure is certainly different, which what players I feel are generally talking about. And your second part, why do they always appear to be bulked up when they leave us? I can't really answer that. I've only been here for 3.5 months. However, a lot of those clubs playing in the Super League now as a result of the work that was done here last year with Mike Eccles and his strength and conditioning staff. So I'm not really sure how much weight or size they can put on in 6 months of football, but rest assured that the groundwork and the majority of the work was done here at the Broncos. Gary writes, as long as I can remember, we have always operated there with the mobile and lightweight packers. That's something you're addressing. Yes, it is, Gary. We've signed, retained and continued to look for some sizeable forwards. But not only we're looking for size, we're looking for smart and skillful forwards. So next year, you can rest assured that we're going to have a bigger pack, a mobile pack and a skillful pack. There's 2 signings in the wings, and that would certainly address that criteria. Microwatts, what sort of rugby should he expect to play next year? Michael, the type of coach that I am, as I said, I'm a skill-based coach, so I want to challenge the players to identify weaknesses by using their smarts as well as their skill. I'm not about running over the top of people. However, with the size that we're going to have next year, there's going to be more opportunity for that. So I'm not going to limit the player's ability to play what he sees, but certainly trying to encourage smarts and skill next year in expansion type of football, and just using the deficiencies of the defences that we're playing against. Greg writes, which young player will have the biggest impact next season? It's a good question, Greg, and it's a tough one to answer. We've got so many great young players in our program. I think having John Wallace in the program and him not doing an off-season for 2 years, he's the one that really excites me. Having Joe Keys not doing an off-season for 2 years, just his ability to understand the game is refreshing, but just having him here working with the senior players is going to be a massive advantage for him as a player. But one of the smokies, if I can, it would be Alex Walker. He's had a massive season with our 19, scoring tries at will, and he's a great person to have in our squad, and is an instinctive-based player. He just naturally finds to be at the right place at the right time. So they're 3 guys you can put down in your black book that are going to do some amazing things for our club. Again, Broncos fans, thank you for sending in the questions. I've had a great time answering your questions. I hope it gave you some information, and we look forward to doing this again, and go the Broncos.